In the hustle and bustle of the world, where words overflow like a flood, have we ever considered that true wisdom might lie in silence? In this episode, we will explore the profound wisdom of Chapter 23 of the Tao Te Ching, where Laozi reveals to us the philosophy that speaking less is most natural. In this chapter, Laozi not only discusses the topic of self-cultivation, but also offers a profound insight. Everyone has the freedom to choose how to interact with the world. He begins by depicting the laws of nature, noting that nature itself has its limitations, and even more so for humans. What is unique about humans is that we must make choices. At the beginning of this chapter, Laozi introduces the concept of speaking less. Let's delve into Laozi's original text. Rare words conform to nature. Therefore, a whirlwind does not last a whole morning, and a sudden rain does not last all day. Who causes this? Heaven and earth. Since heaven and earth cannot make it last long, how much less can man? Therefore, those who pursue the Tao are in unity with the Tao. Those who pursue virtue are in unity with virtue. Those who lose are in unity with loss. Those who are in unity with the Tao also gains them. Those who are in unity with virtue, the Tao also rewards them. Those who are in unity with loss, the Tao also loses them. If there is not enough trust, there will be no trust. His meaning is very clear, divided into two parts, front and back. Let's first express his meaning in plain language. Speaking less is in accordance with the natural state. Therefore, a gust of wind will not blow all morning, and a downpour will not last all day. Who causes this phenomenon? It is heaven and earth. Even the special operations of heaven and earth cannot last long, let alone humans. So those who actively seek the Tao are in the same company as the Tao. Those who cultivate virtue are in agreement with virtue, and those who lose virtue are in agreement with the lack of virtue. Those who agree with virtue will also gain the virtue they agree with. Those who agree with the lack of virtue will also lose the virtue they agree with. If the ruler's integrity is insufficient, the people will not trust him. So what does this large paragraph explain, and what does it have to do with speaking? At the beginning, Laozi emphasizes speaking less, which is related to speaking. We have seen two other terms for this. At the beginning, Laozi said, teach without words, which means not speaking, using silence to educate the people. The second is valuing words, which means not speaking easily and cherishing one's words. The third is speaking less, which means speaking very little. Honestly, how can people not speak? If a child does not speak, it is very worrying. For example, Wang Yangming, a philosopher of the Ming dynasty who is now highly admired, had not spoken by the age of 5, which worried his family. Then one day, a divine monk passed by their house, saw him, and changed his name from Wang Yun to Wang Shoren. He later practiced in Yangming Cave and called himself Mr. Yangming. So, Wang Yangming's name was given to him by his grandfather. After that, he did not speak for 5 years, which made his family very anxious. When he finally spoke, he surprised everyone by reciting many poems that his grandfather had read. People asked him how he could do it, and he said that he had already known them since he often listened to them when he was a child. He is a genius. So, a person's speech is indeed considered in many ways. In Laozi's view, as a ruler, you must remember: first, do not speak. Second, do not speak easily. Third, speak very little. Speaking very little is in accordance with your own state. As a ruler, speaking refers to issuing decrees and demanding what the people should do. Such words had better be spoken as little as possible, emphasizing the governance of non-action. It is best to be cautious because once a person speaks, it expresses a certain intention, which includes requirements and purposes. Those who listen and understand will feel the pressure. If they follow this standard, everyone will be very hardworking. If they don't do it for a while, they will think about whether they should be perfunctory and hypocritical. On the surface, they seem to cooperate with you, but in reality, they may not do so. So we must remember that governance is not about speaking much, but about doing what you should do specifically. Confucius taught his student, a student with good eloquence named Zigong, saying, "Do what you say first, and then follow it with words. First, do what you want to say, and then speak." So let's see what Laozi teaches us in this chapter. He says that speaking less is in accordance with one's own state. How does he prove it? He immediately mentions the issue of heaven and earth. In fact, we just read 4 words in chapter 7, heaven and earth are eternal. But here it directly tells you that heaven and earth cannot last long. So Laozi must remember that although he sometimes explains from one aspect, do not forget that he always has a dialectical way of thinking. So he directly says here, a whirlwind does not last a whole morning, and a sudden rain does not last a whole day. Which means that gales and rainstorms are special states of nature that occasionally appear and cannot last long. Although heaven and earth cause wind and rain, they also cannot maintain them for a long time. So for humans, why do you always have to put forward your own ideas and come up with various ideas? In fact, if you have too many ideas, seeking novelty and change, you may fall into a predicament in the end. Especially for the problems of life, they all have a normal state and reason. Now look up at the sky and down at the earth. They all maintain their own appearance. Wind and rain will not last long. Here, we see the word nature for the second time in our minds. Nature is its own appearance. It does not refer to the natural world of heaven and earth and all things. In Laozi's book, we emphasize once again that the word nature appears 5 times, and the meaning is the same, that is, to return to its own appearance. Speaking less is in accordance with its own appearance, and speaking more indicates that you want to change all this. Then there will be complex problems. Then, the latter half of the chapter brings up the Tao. He says that those who actively seek the Tao are in the same company as the Tao, and then there are 2 choices. This is related to establishing great goals. Then look at which 2 I choose later. The first is the person who cultivates virtue, and the second is the person who loses virtue. The person who cultivates virtue agrees that there is virtue, and the person who loses virtue agrees that there is no virtue. So what does virtue mean? To be honest, this virtue is very clear in Laozi. That is, all things in the universe come from the Tao and obtain the blessing of the Tao. That is, they all have their own nature and endowment. In other words, all things do not exist and develop according to their own nature. Only humans are different. As the spirit of all things, their nature is very special. That is, they can recognize and thus have intentions. So cognition plus intention may go wrong and deviate. In other words, all the problems in the world are caused by humans themselves. So what should we do? What we have caused must also be solved by ourselves. The first method of solving is to cultivate virtue, to repair my natural nature, and let it develop in the direction arranged by the Tao. That is, to speak less, to have fewer ideas, to think less about various ideas, to go along with the trend, and not to compete with others. The second kind is the person who loses virtue. He agrees that there is no virtue, and he thinks that this nature is not enough, and the nature is not good. So I have to pursue higher achievements in the relative values of humans. In this way, what may be lost is your original nature and endowment. In this way, even if you succeed in the world, you have also left the Tao. The last sentence he said, the person who agrees with virtue will gain him. The person who agrees with the lack of virtue will lose him. The most important thing is whether to walk on the road of seeking the Tao or to deviate from it. This is the 2 biggest choices in life. In fact, the choices in life are originally right and wrong, or right and wrong, 2 roads. It is impossible for a road to be neither right nor wrong. There is no such thing. In ancient society, people's lives and concepts were relatively simple, and choosing what they often got. The problem is that one's own nature can be gained and lost. If you choose virtue and want to maintain your own nature and follow the arrangement he made, that is one road. The other road, you may choose to pursue achievements in the world and seek relative values. In this case, you may lose your own nature. So this paragraph has a very clear distinction. Everything in life is caused by one's own choices. The important thing is that we may not distinguish between the primary and the secondary and the light and the heavy. As the primary and the heavy, it is certainly my own nature. The light and relative side is the consequence of my deliberate pursuit of relative values in the world. So here, let's review the important concepts again. First, the Tao is the source and destination of all things. Virtue is the nature that all things obtain from the Tao. Only humans can choose whether to follow the nature given by the Tao. So there is the issue of virtue and loss. So what is loss? Here he gives an example, like gales and rainstorms, that is, whirlwinds and sudden rains, which become immoral or immoral. Of course, it must end in the end. What does this illustrate? Plain and light can last forever. It is inevitable to have wind and rain between heaven and earth. If he has any special actions, he must pass quickly and will not last long. Only on the normal path can you maintain for a long time. So people living in the world must also try to find what is the normal path for us. If found, it will be convenient. This chapter is related to the cultivation of sages. A person who wants to cultivate into a sage depends on how he chooses. He can speak desperately, show off his own intelligence, and show off his ideas that are more brilliant than others. Or he can speak less and be content with his own state. In the end, you will find that we have said a lot in our life, most of which are expressing many voices, and your consciousness is whether it is your true consciousness. Can you do these? What we should learn is to pursue the Tao. People think that those who have achieved the Tao forget words and forget how to speak. Because all words may be superfluous, it is better to observe more and appreciate the laws of nature itself and the harmonious effects it creates. So when we say to let nature take its course, it is not a simple act, as if I do nothing and let nature take its course. In fact, many times when you do nothing, it may just be an excuse for laziness. Letting nature take its course must require wisdom. On the one hand, it shows that you forget your original appearance, and on the other hand, you should look at life from a long-term and open perspective, and you will not be persistent about expressing your own ideas at a time and place. If you do a lot, you may get unsatisfactory results. In this episode, we see that the first 4 words of chapter 23 of Laozi are very important, called cherish words and nature. Speaking less is in accordance with its own appearance. Of course, we mentioned earlier that Wang Yangming couldn't speak at the age of 5, but later, he wrote books and became a great philosopher. This situation is different from what we are talking about now. So in the end, you can think about it. Laozi said that speaking less is in accordance with its own appearance. This is certainly a great challenge to us. Some people are deeply inspired by this sentence and even change their names to rare words. But don't forget that speaking less is not equal to not speaking, but whether what you say is at the right time, in the right place, and to the right person. If it is deeply loved, that is, there is something in the words. This can achieve the effect of speaking. And rather than saying a lot, it is better to practice yourself first and then teach by example, which may be more effective. So please think about it. What inspiration does this have for you about speaking less?